It was a legendary escape from a place that was supposed to be inescapable. 55 years ago this month, three men pulled off the impossible, breaking out of Alcatraz.
On a secluded island encircled by the relentless sea stood Alcatraz, a fortress of a prison, legendary in its impregnability. It was a place of myths, a place where escape seemed as distant as the horizon itself. In the annals of prison lore, Alcatraz was the titan, unbeaten and unbreakable. But every legend has its Achilles heel, and Alcatraz was no exception. The year was 1962, a time now shrouded in the mists of history over 60 years ago. Many tales have been spun about Alcatraz, but the one you're about to hear is unique, rich with details that have seldom been whispered before. The legend of Alcatraz wasn't just about its towering walls or the icy, shark-infested waters that lay in wait for any who dared to swim for freedom. It was about the myths that the prison itself nurtured, myths that were as formidable as its walls. Opened in 1934, Alcatraz was a statement. Escape was a dream beyond reach. For 28 years, this remained true, until that fateful escape in 1962, a mere year before the prison's gates would close forever. Officially, it was the cost that sealed Alcatraz's fate, but whispers in the wind spoke of the impact of that escape and how it nudged the prison story toward its end. Alcatraz's legend was as much about its location as its inmates. The cold, salty embrace of the Pacific was a barrier few could brave. The nearest shore, a distant 2 miles away, might as well have been another world. Even in the balmy embrace of summer, the sea's chill was bone deep, the waters rarely warming above a frigid 50 degrees Fahrenheit. To further discourage escape attempts, the prison management and guards propagated additional myths. One such myth was that the waters around the island were infested with sharks. So, even if a prisoner reached the sea and managed to swim in the icy waters, they would be attacked by sharks. Another myth was that all Alcatraz guards were expert marksmen, instructed to shoot any escaping prisoner on sight. Though these were fabrications, they were spread by the prison's administration and guards to reinforce the prison's myth and erase the idea of escape from the prisoners' minds. Within these walls lived the infamous and the feared. Al Capone, the notorious mobster, Machine Gun Kelly, the famed gangster, and Victor Lustig, the charming con artist who sold the Eiffel Tower not once, but twice. For Lustig, a master of escape, Alcatraz was the final challenge, the ultimate stronghold. But in a place like Alcatraz, teeming with minds sharpened by desperation and cunning, peace was a fragile illusion. Throughout its reign, the prison saw 14 escape attempts. Each, save for one, ended in either capture or death. Our story today is about that one daring escape, the one that cracked the facade of Alcatraz and scattered its myths to the winds. So, gather around, for this is not just a tale of a prison, but of the indomitable human spirit, a saga of those who dared to challenge the unchallengeable. Now, let us delve into the lives of the 4 prisoners who orchestrated this daring escape: Alan West, Frank Morris, and the Anglin brothers Clarence and John. You might recall hearing about only 3 escapees, but there were indeed 4 architects of this plan. The plot thickens when we learn about Alan's fate on that fateful night, but let's save that twist for later. Imagine being the mastermind of an escape plan and watching your comrades flee without you. Picture the frustration that gnawed at Alan that night. Each of these 4 had tried to escape from other prisons before, only to find themselves in Alcatraz, where escape was deemed a fantasy. Alan claimed the genesis of the escape plan was his, but fate had a cruel twist in store for him. It was during his mundane cleaning duty on the prison roof that he discovered a vulnerable air vent, not reinforced like the others. This could be their gateway to freedom if they could just cut through those bars. He quickly shared this revelation with Frank Morris, his cell neighbor, a man whose intelligence would become the linchpin of their plan. Frank, with an IQ of 133, was not just smart, but among the top 3% of the world. He was the strategist, the brain behind the brawn. Frank invited the Anglin brothers, whose cell were next to his cell, to join their daring plot. Their proximity was a boon, allowing them constant communication. Their only route to freedom lay behind their cells, a hidden world of maintenance corridors and plumbing. If they could break out of their cells, they could make their way to the air vent on the roof. But how could they break out of their steel and concrete cells? The answer lay in the small ventilation grates in each cell. Frank noticed the prison's aging walls, weakened by years of neglect and the relentless salt water. It was possible to dig through, but they needed tools. How? Remarkably, they managed to smuggle in spoons from the cafeteria. Night after night, they chiseled away at the walls with these spoons, an arduous task that took months. Of course, during this digging period, they had to keep their work a secret. They couldn't let any guards see or hear them. One of the theories suggests that they usually worked when other prisoners were playing musical instruments. Every night, prisoners were allowed to play musical instruments for an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. So, they worked most during this time because the music covered up the noise of digging. Sometimes there were maintenance tasks done in the prison, which would create noise, so the group would start digging during those moments when they felt the guards couldn't hear. And, of course, there was always at least one of them keeping an eye on the situation and the location, watching for any guards coming to check on them or not. Because Alcatraz had a lot of guards, the ratio of guards to prisoners there was higher than in any other prison in America. The guards used to take regular counts of the prisoners, which added an element of surprise for the inmates. What helped them further was that the other prisoners in nearby cells were aware of their escape plan. They could see them digging in the wall, and none of them snitched on them. On the contrary, they helped them. The prisoners of Alcatraz really showed us something about sticking together. When some of them decided to escape, they didn't think, let's tell on them to get in good with the guards. Nope, it was the complete opposite. It was like, we're all in this together. The FBI report said that up to 80 prisoners knew about the escape plan. That's almost half the inmates in Alcatraz at the time. Imagine half the prison knew and not a single one spilled the beans. It's like they all had this brotherhood, a kind of unspoken pact. While they were busy digging their way out, they had to keep it a secret. They couldn't let the guards see the holes they were making, so they got creative. They made fake wall panels in the prison workshop, painting them to match the colors of their cell walls. They even used a bit of cement to keep these panels in place. These panels covered up the holes they were digging, and just to be extra careful, they'd put their clothes or musical instruments in front of the panels to hide them even more. After months of digging, they finally made the holes big enough to squeeze their bodies through. It was a big moment. They were one step closer to freedom. So, after they made the holes in their cells, the prisoners had a bigger challenge. They needed a way to get off the island. This was probably the hardest part. They had to make a boat somehow to cross the water. They found an article in one of the prison's mechanic magazines about making rubber boats and life vests out of raincoats. Lucky for them, raincoats were plenty in the prison and nobody really cared about them. So they started collecting these coats, sneaking them from all over the prison. The other inmates even helped out. They managed to gather about 50 raincoats. But where to hide all these coats and where could they work on making the boat? The only place they could do this was the area above their cells, the same place where Alan West found the ventilation shaft. But this place was open and the guards were always watching. So Alan, following Frank's instructions, came up with a really smart trick. Since Alan always had to clean this area, he convinced the guards to let him hang sheets on the walls to keep the dust from falling below. He even made it look like the dust was a big problem by throwing it around. The plan worked. The guards allowed him to hang sheets, giving them a hidden spot to work on their boat. This was a huge security mistake by the guards and a big embarrassment for Alcatraz. It was such a scandal that they tried to hide it in the initial reports. It wasn't until 1990, 20 years later, that this story came out. Without this mistake, the escape plan probably wouldn't have worked. For 2 whole months, our guys took turns working in this hidden workshop. They worked on making the rubber boat and life vests, and also cutting the bars on the ventilation shaft. They turned the place into a real workshop, sneaking in tools and stuff to help with their work. But there was one big problem. They couldn't be in their cells all the time. The guards checked on them at random times. What if a guard came and found one of them missing? Their whole plan would be ruined. So, they made fake heads to trick the guards into thinking they were sleeping. They worked mostly at night, so they'd put these heads on their pillows, cover them up, and the guards would just see a head and move on. The pictures you see here are the actual fake heads, still kept in the prison archives. How did they make these heads? They used stuff from their cells, soap, toilet paper, cement dust from their digging, and some paste from the prison workshop. They even got paint from the workshop to make the heads look real. But the hardest part was the hair. How did they get real hair? Clarence, one of the brothers, worked in the prison barber shop. He collected hair from the inmates bit by bit until they had enough for the fake heads. So that's how they managed to work on their boat every night without getting caught. They took turns, not all going up at the same time. After 2 months of hard work, they finally finished the boat and life vests. Then the big day came. June 11, 1962 was the day it all went down. After lights out at 9:30 p.m., the 4 prisoners kicked off their big escape. Each one put the fake head on their pillow and covered it with a blanket. So if any guard passed by, they'd think the prisoners were asleep. They opened the ventilation holes they'd been digging for months and climbed into the passage behind their cells. This passage would lead them to their workshop and then to the ventilation shaft to the roof. But only 3 of them made it out of their cells. The one left behind was Alan West. He couldn't open his vent. He'd used cement and extra materials to seal it, and since he hadn't opened it for days, it hardened, making it tough to open again. He needed to dig it out all over again. When the other 3 saw what happened, they told him to catch up as soon as he could. They went ahead, and Alan kept trying to dig out his vent. First, they prepared the rubber boat and life vests. Then, they removed the iron bars from the vent shaft leading to the roof. But Alan still couldn't get out of his cell. They had agreed that if anyone got stuck, the others would go on without them. Imagine how Alan must have felt, being the one who found the vent and worked on the plan for months, only to be left behind. Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin made it to the roof and quietly sneaked to the fence, which was just a simple mesh. They cut through it easily and made their way to the shore. There, they inflated the rubber boat using a modified musical instrument owned by Frank, designed not to make any noise. At 7 a.m., when the wake-up bell rang and the routine morning count began, every prisoner was supposed to stand in their cell for the guards. When they got to Frank's cell, the guard called out to him a few times. When he got no response, he reached in to shake him, only to have the fake head roll onto the floor. Panic ensued. The alarms went off, and a massive search operation began. The FBI was called in to help with the search and investigation. Alan West was the first one they questioned since his vent was obvious. He cooperated, but it's believed he kept some information hidden to protect his fellow escapees. The guards swept the entire island but found no trace of the 3. This confirmed they had made it to the sea on their boat. The FBI and authorities used boats for an extensive search around the island, but found nothing. The other inmates were questioned one by one, but nobody gave any useful information. The prison brotherhood held strong. The search quickly became one of the biggest in FBI history, but the escapees were nowhere to be found. To this day, there's been no trace of them. The escape from Alcatraz was, by all means, a successful operation. The investigation continued for 15 years until it was handed over to local police. The FBI officially concluded that the 3 drowned, but whether this was true or just to save face is still debated. The main evidence supporting this theory was bags made from the same material as the raincoats used for the boat and life vests. By the way, they found the life vests, but never found the rubber boat. Inside the bags, they discovered there were photos and letters clearly belonging to the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence. The bags had pictures of them and their families and letters they had written in prison. These items must have been really important to the brothers, and they wouldn't have left them behind unless something bad happened, like drowning in the sea. So, this was a big clue that they might have drowned. But a lot of experts disagreed because no bodies were found. If they had really drowned, their bodies would have floated, and with all the extensive searches, at least one body should have been found. Many experts found it illogical that no bodies were ever recovered. Then there's this famous photo from 1975, supposedly of John and Clarence in Brazil. It suggests they might have moved to Brazil after escaping. But there's a lot of debate about whether the photo is really of them. Nothing's 100% sure. Also, the brothers' mother used to get flower bouquets from an unknown sender. Who was this mysterious person sending flowers and greetings to their mother without any apparent reason? And in 2013, a letter allegedly from John Anglin reached the FBI. He claimed to have escaped successfully with the others, but now he was old, 83 years old, and sick with cancer. He was ready to surrender in exchange for medical treatment. That's one of the theories and analyses of this story. And there we reach the end of our tale. We'll see you soon with a new story. Until then, you can watch this video. Ciao for now.